From turning the military loose on war veterans to literally choking corrupt officials in the White House, these presidents didn't just mess up, they nearly destroyed America. And some of these stories are so insane, you'll think I'm making them up. And to kick things off, we'll start with a guy who managed to screw up his presidency in exactly 31 days. William Henry Harrison, the president who set a record nobody wants. Shortest time in office ever. Back in 1841, Harrison was 68, which made him one of the oldest guys to win the job at that point. Maybe he felt like people doubted him because of his age. So what did he do? Delivered a marathon inauguration speech. 1 hour and 45 minutes. Outside, in brutal March weather. Freezing temperatures, pouring rain. No jacket, no hat. Just pure stubbornness. Like watching someone's grandpa insist he can still dunk a basketball. A few weeks later, Harrison got sick. Historians used to blame the speech, figured he caught pneumonia from standing in the cold. Modern research suggests it was probably typhoid fever, likely from contaminated water in the White House plumbing system. Whatever the cause, the result was the same. 31 days into his presidency, Harrison was gone. 0 laws signed. 0 major decisions made. His entire term was shorter than most people's notice period at a job. Worse yet, his death created chaos. The Constitution wasn't clear about presidential succession back then. Did the vice president become the actual president, or just fill in temporarily? John Tyler decided he was the real deal now and dared anyone to challenge him. Nobody did. Harrison's entire legacy boils down to one incredibly long speech and the shortest administration in history. Talk about a wasted opportunity. But at least Harrison had an excuse. He was dead. This next guy had 4 full years and still torpedoed the economy. Benjamin Harrison is pretty much forgotten today. Ask 100 people who he was, and you'd get blank stares. Maybe someone would guess he invented electricity or something. Wrong Harrison, buddy. This one's legacy is economic sabotage. In 1890, he signed the McKinley Tariff, cranking import taxes up to nearly 50%. The goal? Supposedly to help American manufacturers. The reality? Total disaster. Consumer prices exploded. International trade tanked. American farmers got crushed in the crossfire. To make things even better, Harrison spent money like it was going out of style, draining the entire federal surplus. Then came the kicker. All of this economic chaos didn't hit until Harrison was already out of office. The Panic of 1893 wrecked the nation, and his successor Grover Cleveland got stuck cleaning up the mess. Meanwhile, Harrison had already bailed back to Indianapolis to resume his quiet law career, acting like his presidency never happened. He didn't start wars or commit treason. He just lit the fuse on an economic bomb and bailed out before the explosion. Harrison crashed the economy. But this next president, he turned every American into a slave hunter. In 1850, the nation was divided over slavery. The South loved it. The North, not so much. And the South was threatening to secede. So Millard Fillmore signed the Fugitive Slave Act, legally requiring every U.S. citizen to help capture runaway slaves. The law was brutal. Give food to someone escaping slavery? 6 months in jail. Hide them in your home? $1,000 fine. And it didn't matter if you lived in a free state. But here's where it gets even worse. Officials got paid bounties for capturing people, and they made more money if they ruled someone was a slave instead of free. $10 if they sent someone back into slavery, only $5 if they set them free. Freeborn Black Americans could be kidnapped and enslaved with 0 legal protection because accused people had no right to a trial and weren't even allowed to speak in their own defense. And when people protested this insanity, Fillmore threatened to send federal troops to enforce his law. As you probably guessed, this completely backfired. Normal people who never cared about slavery suddenly realized what was happening, and abolitionist movements exploded overnight. Fillmore thought he was keeping the peace, but he just poured gasoline on the fire and pushed the nation one giant step closer to civil war. Fillmore thought he was keeping the peace, but this next guy started an actual war zone on American soil. Franklin Pierce looked like he belonged in Hollywood and could talk his way out of anything. He got elected to solve the slavery crisis. Instead, he made one catastrophic mistake, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. This law reversed the Missouri Compromise and said new territories could vote on whether to allow slavery. Sounds democratic, right? Wrong. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces flooded into Kansas, locked and loaded. What followed was a 5-year nightmare. Homes burned to ash, entire families slaughtered, 200 people killed, and $2 million in property destroyed. And Pierce? He sent federal troops to back the pro-slavery government, which had stolen power through voter fraud and outright violence. He stood by and watched Kansas tear itself apart. Instead of calming tensions between North and South, Pierce threw fuel on the flames and pushed the country one giant step closer to civil war. Pierce threw fuel on the flames, but this next guy turned weapons of war on American heroes. Herbert Hoover ran for president promising prosperity for everyone. Instead, he delivered economic catastrophe. Unemployment skyrocketed to 25%. Banks collapsed. Businesses shut down. And Hoover's solution? Do nothing. He believed government intervention would make things worse, so he just watched the country fall apart. Then came the moment that destroyed his legacy forever. In 1932, over 15,000 World War I veterans set up camps in Washington, D.C., peacefully demanding the combat bonuses they'd been promised. These were men who'd risked everything for their country, and now they couldn't feed their families. Hoover's answer? Attack them. He ordered the United States Army to clear them out. General Douglas MacArthur led the assault, with a young George Patton commanding cavalry and Dwight Eisenhower coordinating on the ground. They hit American veterans with military tanks, choking tear gas, and razor-sharp bayonets. 2 veterans died. A baby suffocated from the gas. Over 1,000 were wounded. When newspapers published photos of bleeding veterans being driven out by their own military, it was game over for Hoover. He didn't just fumble the Depression, he turned the military against the men who'd saved the country. Hoover declared war on veterans. This next guy declared war on civil rights. After Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, America needed someone to finish what the Civil War started. Instead, they got Andrew Johnson, a Tennessee slave owner who thought racial equality was a terrible idea. He vetoed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which would have guaranteed formerly enslaved people basic human rights like owning property, signing contracts, and equal treatment under the law. Congress wasn't having it. They overrode his veto and rammed through the 14th Amendment. But Johnson wasn't done sabotaging progress. He granted sweeping pardons to former Confederate leaders by the thousands, letting traitors who'd taken up arms against the United States waltz right back into power across the South. These pardons gave oxygen to the Ku Klux Klan and laid the groundwork for Jim Crow laws that would oppress Black Americans for generations. Congress finally had enough and impeached him, the first presidential impeachment in U.S. history. On May 16, 1868, the Senate voted. Johnson needed 1/3 plus 1 to survive. He got exactly that, 1 vote. Senator Edmund Ross of Kansas shocked everyone by voting not guilty, and his political career died on the spot. The trial continued with 2 more votes in late May, and Johnson survived those too. America desperately needed healing after the Civil War. Johnson gave them a century of racial division instead. Johnson sabotaged civil rights. This next guy annihilated free speech. Woodrow Wilson guided America through World War I, which sounds heroic until you see what he did back home. He weaponized the law against his own citizens. The Espionage Act and Sedition Act turned disagreement into a crime. Criticize the war? Prison. Speak against the draft? Prison. Say something negative about the flag? Believe it or not, prison. The government prosecuted over 2,000 people under these laws. Socialist leader Eugene Debs gave one anti-war speech and got slapped with a 10-year sentence. Journalists, activists, and ordinary Americans were thrown in jail for exercising what was supposed to be their First Amendment right. Wilson choked out dissent in the name of patriotism. After the war ended, he pivoted to his grand ambition, the League of Nations, a global peacekeeping organization. Wilson championed it like his legacy depended on it, which it did. But the U.S. Senate had other plans. They voted it down, worried it would trap America in foreign wars forever. The ultimate humiliation? The League formed anyway with dozens of nations signing on, everyone except the United States. Meanwhile, Wilson's Treaty of Versailles squeezed Germany so hard economically that historians credit it with fueling the rise of the Third Reich. Wilson crushed freedom at home and accidentally set the stage for the next World War. Not exactly the legacy he imagined. Wilson set the stage for the next World War. This guy launched one built on fiction. George W. Bush seemed like a likable president at first. Then 9/11 changed everything. He rallied the nation together, and then proceeded to make some of the most consequential mistakes in modern American history. Iraq. The entire war was justified on one claim. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, biological agents, ready to deploy. The intelligence was rock solid, they said, or so we thought. After the invasion, the CIA launched a massive search. 18 months of hunting. The result? Absolutely nothing. No stockpiles, no active weapons programs. Zero. Just a fabricated intelligence report that cost America $1 trillion, over 4,000 lives, and left the Middle East in chaos for generations. Back home, Bush signed the Patriot Act in October 2001, barely a month after the attacks. It shredded privacy rights overnight. The NSA started collecting data on millions of Americans without warrants, phone records, emails, browsing history, all swept up in the name of fighting terror. Those surveillance powers still in effect today. Then came Hurricane Katrina in August 2005. New Orleans drowned. The government's response was pathetic. Thousands trapped on rooftops. The Superdome turned into a hellscape with 10,000 desperate people, broken infrastructure, and zero plan. Bush looked paralyzed. And before his presidency ended, the Great Recession crashed down in 2008. Millions lost homes and jobs. Bush didn't just stumble, he reshaped America in ways we're still untangling. Bush fumbled wars and disasters. This guy watched the country disintegrate and lifted zero fingers to stop it. When James Buchanan took office in 1857, America was a powder keg ready to explode over slavery. He could have led, could have taken a stand. Instead, he punted to the Supreme Court and hoped they'd magically fix everything. That gamble gave us the Dred Scott decision, one of the worst rulings in American history. The court declared Black Americans could never be citizens. Buchanan acted like this was fantastic news. But the shadiest part? He didn't just applaud from the sidelines. Starting in February 1857, Buchanan secretly lobbied Supreme Court justices, pressuring them to issue a sweeping pro-slavery ruling. He wrote letters to Justice Catron asking about the case. He urged Justice Breyer to make it comprehensive. Then, at his inauguration on March 4th, 2 days before the decision dropped, Buchanan smugly announced the slavery question would be settled speedily and finally by the court. He knew the outcome because he'd engineered it. The plan exploded in his face. The North was furious. 3 years later, Abraham Lincoln won the White House with zero support from the South. Southern states freaked out and started seceding. By the time Lincoln was sworn in, the Union was collapsing. And Buchanan? He claimed secession was unconstitutional, but insisted the government couldn't actually do anything to prevent it. Make it make sense. When he finally left office, the country was unraveling. States had bolted. Military installations were being seized. Civil war was days away. Buchanan didn't just fail. He paralyzed America at its most critical moment. Buchanan watched the nation collapse without lifting a finger. But this final president turned the government into his personal crime syndicate. Warren G. Harding once admitted, "I am not fit for this office and should never have been here." He wasn't wrong. Harding surrounded himself with the Ohio Gang, corrupt friends who looted federal agencies. The Teapot Dome scandal? His Interior Secretary secretly leased federal oil reserves for cash bribes, becoming the first cabinet member ever sent to prison. But that's nothing compared to Charles Forbes. As head of the Veterans Bureau, Forbes stole over $200 million meant for wounded World War I veterans. He sold their medical supplies to cronies for pennies, then bought them back at inflated prices and pocketed the difference. When investigators closed in, the Bureau's chief counsel shot himself. Harding eventually discovered the betrayal and physically grabbed Forbes by the throat in the White House, screaming, "You double-crossing bastard!" Meanwhile, his attorney general took payoffs during Prohibition, and Harding spent his days golfing, drinking illegally, and cheating on his wife. He later said, "I have no trouble with my enemies, but my damn friends keep me walking the floor at night." In 1923, Harding died of a heart attack with scandals exploding around him. He didn't just fail as a president, he turned the White House into a criminal enterprise and robbed the veterans who'd sacrificed everything for America. And that's your top 10. 10 presidents who didn't just fail. They tanked economies, legalized kidnapping, sent tanks after veterans, stole from wounded soldiers, and watched the country burn. From the guy who died in a month to the one who choked his own cabinet member in the White House, these weren't leaders. They were disasters with voting rights. But here's the craziest part. America survived them all. Every scandal, every betrayal, every catastrophic decision. Turns out, we're tougher than our worst presidents. Did we learn our lesson though? Not really. Look around and you'll see the same mistakes on repeat. Corruption scandals, questionable wars, rights getting trampled when fear takes over. It's almost impressive how bad our collective memory is. But hey, at least you know the history. Whether that stops us from repeating it, that's up to you. Comment below which president shocked you most. Think their presidencies were bad? Wait till you see how they actually died. The next video breaks it all down. And subscribe for more history that doesn't put you to sleep. Way more coming.